Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Facebook and Twitter live presentation about a clinical trial for people who are sick with COVID-19, providing some new ideas about ways to help them get better. I'm joined with considerable expertise along with him, Dr. Christopher Austin, who is the director of the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, otherwise known as NCATS, which is part of NIH, and he is the lead person at NIH who has helped put together this trial and will now be overseeing it. And let me just say a word about what ACTIV is. This is called ACTIV-1, this trial. So what is ACTIV? ACTIV stands for Accelerating COVID-19 Therapeutic Interventions and Vaccines, ACTIV. And this is a therapeutic intervention we're talking about. ACTIV is a public-private partnership involving 20 pharmaceutical companies, several NIH institutes, including NCATS, as well as the FDA, the CDC, BARDA, the Veterans Administration, the Department of Defense, a lot of partners. And this came together back in April to try to optimize everything we could do to speed up finding answers to help people who have acquired this virus, SARS-CoV-2, and who need therapeutic things to help them. And that has already led to some advances, and we are here to talk about a trial that's going to be testing 3 new kinds of approaches for those people who are particularly sick with this condition in the hospital. So that's the context, and we will take your questions from Facebook and Twitter. So you know how to do that. Send them in, and I will try to see as many of those that I can answer. We'll try to fit them in. But let me start off by asking Dr. Austin, what is ACTIV-1 and what condition, particularly caused by COVID-19, is this trying to address? Which category of patients are we talking about, and what's the idea about the approach?
Yeah, well, it's a different approach from the other active trials that NIH has started so far. Other active trials have focused primarily on the virus itself, and that's appropriate. This is a viral infection, but this focuses on a very severe effect of that infection, which is actually caused by the immune system overreacting and actually attacking the patient's own body, something called cytokine storm. And that cytokine storm, we think, is actually responsible for a lot of the disability and death that comes from COVID-19 disease. It's actually, we don't think, caused, and by we, I mean the entire research community, not caused by the primary infection, but actually caused by this cytokine storm, which can be really rapidly disabling and even fatal.
So I've tried this metaphor out. I'll see what you think of it. Think of being infected with this virus like having a small fire in your house. Yeah. And think of the immune system as the sprinkler system that has to cut on and put the fire out. But I think we all know circumstances where the fire wasn't that bad, but the sprinklers kept going and the real damage was done from all the water. So is that kind of what the problem is here? The immune system sprinklers have just got to be toned down a bit, or they're going to do more harm than good?
Yeah, yes, and I would extend that analogy by saying that what the body does is, instead of having water come out of your sprinkles, gasoline comes out of the sprinklers, and actually makes the fire even worse. And can burn the house down very, very rapidly. So what?
Now we're getting very flamed up here. I can see.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You know, all the fighter fighters of America will be calling in. But it's probably important to talk about what the heck cytokines are anyway. So cytokines are normal chemicals produced by our bodies in response to infection, and they're really important for fighting off all kinds of infections. And a lot of those lovely flu-like symptoms that we've all had, the fatigue, the body aches, the fever, those are, to a great degree, those cytokines doing their job to fight off the infection. And so the problem comes when the infection is not cleared rapidly by that initial response by the immune system. And the immune system, trying to do its job, keeps getting more and more and more revved up, produces way too much of these cytokines very rapidly, pumps them into the blood. They get to very high levels, and the cells that are producing these chemicals, cytokines, and the cells that respond to them then start attacking the body. And they attack the lungs primarily in this disorder and in others that are caused by this cytokine storm phenomenon. But they attack basically every organ in the body. So it can cause lung failure, respiratory failure, damages the heart, the kidneys, the brain, the skin, the vasculature. Virtually every part of the body can be affected quite severely. And that is actually what puts a lot of patients in the ICU and ultimately kills them, unfortunately. So what we want to do here is not only turn the sprinklers off, but turn it back to water. And so how are we going to do that? Well, a lot has been learned through the fundamental science of immunology over the last 20 years or so. And so we understand a lot about what those chemicals are, how they do their good work and their bad work. And so there are three different approaches that we're taking. That's one of the reasons we're excited about this. There's three really complementary approaches. One of them is actually attacking or binding to or inhibiting one of those chemicals itself, and that's the drug called infliximab. The second one is a drug that binds to the receptors on the cells that get affected by other cytokines called CCR2 and CCR5. That's cenicriviroc. And the third one acts right on the cells themselves and prevents them from getting overexcited and hyperactive. And that's abatacept. That's the third of the three drugs.
So they have different mechanisms. And are these like brand new drugs that have never been put into people before?
Well, that's one of the other reasons we're excited about the trial is that it's a great example of repurposing. And Francis, as you know, NCATS does a lot of repurposing because we think there's great potential for treating all kinds of diseases. But what's important here is that these drugs have been on the market. Two of them have been on the market. In one case since 1998, in the other case since 2002. Cenicriviroc hasn't been on the market yet, but it's been in many, many patients in clinical trials. So what that means is that the medical community and FDA has and patients have had over years, decades in some cases, experience with these drugs. They've been in tens or hundreds of thousands of patients. So we really understand their safety profile and their effectiveness. In case people are wondering, well, what the heck were they used for? The first two were the ones that are approved were approved for rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, autoimmune diseases. And the third one, cenicriviroc, is actually under study for HIV and a fibrotic syndrome of the liver called NASH. But this is a subject for another day, why one can use drugs that are developed for one indication for sometimes what seems like a completely different one. But that's the advantage of this trial. And it'll be a little different from some of the monoclonal antibodies that have been developed that are being studied in ACTIV-2 and ACTIV-3. Those are wonderfully potentially targeted. They are targeted therapies right at this virus, at the warhead of that virus, something called the spike protein. That's what those monoclonal antibodies go after. But they've never been in people before. They're brand new. Oh, there they are. There are those antibodies that are going to stick right to those spike proteins, and those are wonderful. But to your point, we have no clinical experience with those compounds, whereas with these we have lots of experience. So we hope that the safety issues will be less.
Yeah. So we think they're probably safe, but is there any evidence? These drugs have been around a while. You said one of them was approved in 1998. So there must be people who are taking these already before COVID-19 came along. Is there any suggestion that people who are on these drugs actually were less likely to get really sick?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, there is some evidence of that. And it's one of the things that was in their favor for being chosen by the active prioritization team to be tested in the first place?
So I'm getting live questions coming in. One is maybe going beyond ACTIV-1. There seems to be a lot of research happening for COVID-19. You bet there is.
Yeah,
Can
that's
you
true.
summarize all the efforts? Wow.
We can confirm that.
Okay, let me rattle right through them. So vaccines, the United States has 4 large-scale phase 3 trials that are happening. 2 of them are currently on a pause, the other 2 going forward, and 2 others will start in the next couple of months. So that's the vaccine research. That's a huge undertaking. To have gotten to phase 3 in just about 6 or 7 months is just an amazing achievement. Usually that would be a 5-year effort. And as far as therapeutics, you're hearing about ACTIV-1. There's an ACTIV-2, 3, 4, and 5 that are already running. 2 of those are on monoclonal antibodies, one for inpatients, one for outpatients. There's a trial on anticoagulants, because we know another thing that happens to the really sick people with this can be blood clotting, and you might be able to save their lives by giving them a blood thinner. So that's going on. And then there's a trial that's basically trying to take new ideas of things that might have a big effect and quickly test them out. That's called ACTIV-5, the big effect trial. But on top of that, connected to ACTIV, we have trials on convalescent plasma. We have trials on intravenous immunoglobulin, which is basically a concentrated set of antibodies from people who have survived COVID-19. And then we have a whole bunch of work going on building better diagnostic tests so that you could start to have those even more widely available. So that's a quick summary. And some of us are absolutely having our life consumed by trying to make sure we are doing everything we can to speed up getting these things tested, and if they're safe, getting them out there where people can benefit from them. Let me keep asking you, Chris, here other questions. ACTIV-1 is considered to be an adaptive trial. What does that mean, and why does it matter?
Yeah. Well, I think to put this in context, I think it's something we're seeing in many ways with COVID. That COVID has forced us in a very good way in some cases to accelerate the kind of innovation that had been happening in how clinical trials are run, how drugs are evaluated in people, and the prevalence that is the use of these so-called adaptive trials, which is universal across active, as you know. Every one of these trials is an adaptive trial, is really quite an innovation all by itself. And it's something that really was made possible, if you want to think of it that way, by what is otherwise a very tragic situation of the COVID-19 pandemic. So what is an adaptive trial? Well, in normal clinical trials that have been going on for the last 50, 60 years, normally one has one drug and then a placebo or some other comparison. And that works wonderfully. But the problem is that it's slow. It's very it's definitive frequently, but it takes a very long time. With COVID-19, we did not have that time. We simply, patients cannot wait. So the adaptive trial allows us to put multiple shots on goal, if you will, multiple approaches to a single syndrome, in this case, the cytokine storm syndrome of COVID-19, and test them all at the same time in one combined trial. It's also better for patients because we have one placebo group and 3 active arms. So if you come into the trial, normally one would have a 50-50 chance of getting the placebo versus the active drug. Now, we don't know at the beginning whether it's actually better or worse to get the active, but the important thing is that we think there might be activity or benefit from these drugs, or else we wouldn't do the study in the first place, right? But so in an adaptive trial, in this one, 3 out of 4 chances you're going to get on one of those drugs. And the other use of the word adaptive is that we follow very closely what the results are. We don't wait until the end. So in this case, we're looking at a quarter of the way, halfway through, and 3/4 of the way through, and looking at each of the 3 drugs and saying, have any of them reached the point where there's unequivocal evidence that this drug works? If it has, and the other one hasn't, we don't have to wait for all the other ones. We stop that one. The company will go right to FDA to get whatever regulatory action they deem appropriate, and the other ones will continue. Conversely, if one of the drugs, three-quarters of the way through, just doesn't seem to be benefiting anybody, then that's officially called futility, and we'll stop the drug and continue the other ones. And if there's a new immunomodulator that comes on the scene in the next 2 or 3 months that looks just the greatest, we can add that to this trial without skin of beat. So it's a really wonderful approach and a much more efficient approach. It's going to get us the answers faster. It's better for patients. It's better for science, better for medicine. So that's an adaptive trial.
So that's helpful. How exactly are you going to decide who to offer this trial to? What's the kind of patient that you're looking to enroll?
Yeah.
How many patients do you need, and how are you going to decide if it's working? What's your endpoint? How do you decide whether the trial has succeeded?
Right. Well, these are sick patients in the trial. So in order to get into the trial, you have to either be in the hospital already or in the emergency room, very sick, waiting to get admitted. You have to have, on the chest x-ray, you have to have evidence of pretty bad pneumonia, or what looks like a pneumonia, or the kind of damage to the lungs that are caused by cytokine storm that I mentioned earlier. And you have to have trouble breathing. You have to have a low blood oxygen level or require supplemental oxygen. You can actually be on a ventilator if you've gotten to that point and still be eligible for the trial. So those are the people that we're looking for. They have to be adults, have to be over 18, and there's a bunch of exclusions to make sure that people don't have conditions that might interact with the drugs. But that's the main inclusion. That's the main selection for putting people in the trial. For 2 of the 3 drugs, it's a single treatment. There's one dose. That's it. For Batacept and infliximab, and the other one you get for 28 days. It's an oral drug, and then what the outcome is the amount of time the person spends in the hospital shortened? Is their disability shortened? And is their rate of death shortened? And so coming into the hospital, they're in the hospital, very sick, have to be on oxygen, and then the outcome is 1, 2, and 4 weeks later. Are they getting out of the hospital faster? Are they less disabled when they get out? And are they living longer? And
makes
more.
Total sense.
Yep.
We're talking about a circumstance
something
you're
you're
worried about.
Yeah.
You're worried about the immune system having been overreactive. Have to think about, could this actually be harmful if you gave it too soon? I mean, if I got SARS-CoV-2 tomorrow, which I hope I won't, and I had some early symptoms because my immune system's trying to actually take on that virus and knock it out. If you paralyzed my immune system right at that early point, could that actually be harmful? How do you balance those things?
Yeah, it almost certainly would be, which is, and if I could mention another drug just briefly, there's a drug called dexamethasone that some people probably will remember that was shown in a trial in the UK to decrease disease and death in people who were extremely sick, people who were on ventilators. But there was evidence that if it was given early to people with less mild disease, they actually did worse, probably for exactly the reason you're saying. And some of the people listening might be kind of confused and scratching their heads because they said, okay, let me get this straight. You got some treatments that are antivirals, and you're giving immune system boosters to these people. Those are monoclonal antibodies, hyperimmune globulin, convalescent plasma. Those are all things that make the immune system work better. And now you're telling me you have a trial that's going to tamp down the immune system. Can't you guys decide which is which? And the answer, and that's one of the complexities, the really frustrating complexities of COVID-19 disease is that early on, absolutely, what you want is to have your immune system get in there and knock this virus out. And if you can't do it on your own, to get an antiviral like remdesivir, to get some extra help from the antibodies that will give you that were made by somebody else or made by a cell. But if your immune system, either by itself or with that help, still can't knock out the infection, then the body will have advanced to this point where what's actually the problem is the immune system itself that has become so hyperactive in trying to fight the disease off that even if the virus is gone, and we see this in very sick patients, the virus is gone and these patients are still extraordinarily sick.
Right.
And the reason they're sick is their immune system is fighting them, is actually doing it.
We're back to the fire and the sprinklers, and which system is that you're trying to deal with in a given patient, and you got to really take
the timing is really important. And but if they are so sick that they have those characteristics that I talked about, then they have cytokine storm. But I should say that we're not taking any chances, because everybody in the trial is going to get remdesivir, which is an antiviral, and they can be on convalescent plasma. They can get convalescent plasma, and they can get dexamethasone at the discretion of their treating physician. The other thing, which I think is just another wonderful example of the ACTIV program working together, is you mentioned the anticoagulants a minute ago, so-called ACTIV-1, because both of those are to treat not the infection itself, but the effects of the virus laid on, either coagulation or cytokine storm. We're looking to co-enroll, have patients be able to be on both trials simultaneously.
Really? Okay.
And that's
really by signing up in the trial, you're not excluding yourself from other things that you might have wanted to have as part of the standard of care or even another trial.
Yeah, exactly.
Question from somebody on the internet asking, this is an interesting question, and you and I, with some history in genetics, might be intrigued by this. Do people who have a history of autoimmune disease, that is where their immune system has been a little too active, are they more likely to get in trouble with this cytokine storm if they get SARS-CoV-2?
Yeah, we don't. I think it's fair to say that we don't have the data definitively to tell us yet. There is a platform that, Francis, you know about, that NCATS is developing called N3C that I think will help us with that question. But right now we don't know. However, in small numbers, as you mentioned before, there is evidence that people who are on drugs, including these drugs, for autoimmune disease seem to do better.
Yeah.
Now that could be, and you might think, well, gosh, maybe they'll do worse. So the question is, I think the questioner is asking, if you have an autoimmune disease and you're not on a drug, do you do worse? And we don't know the answer to that question.
It's a good question.
It's a good question. Yeah.
There is some information on the flip side of that. So when you look at people who get infected with SARS-CoV-2, who get very sick very quickly, recent data just published in Science 2 or 3 weeks ago shows that those individuals, many of them have a genetic problem with interleukin that is not responding the way it's supposed to, or, coming back to the immune system, they have their own autoantibodies against interleukin. So they're preventing their immune system from doing its thing. They've sort of turned the water off on the sprinklers, if I'm going too far with this analogy, but you know what I'm saying. So yeah, we've kind of seen something on that end of it. Do we have better ideas about the autoimmunity as a risk? That would be fun to look at. So people are also asking, because there's a lot about COVID-19 that's wrapped up in this term Operation Warp Speed. And Operation Warp Speed is actually paying for the cost of this trial to be run. Actually, you are, taxpayers, paying for it by this going through the Congress and coming out in a way to try to move this along. But Warp Speed sounds like, boy, you're going awful fast here and maybe cutting some corners. How can you reassure people that these fast-tracked trials are not compromising on safety?
This is really important. Um, People should be absolutely assured that every um, uh, every normal and in addition some additional um, uh, uh, steps are being taken to assure the safety of all the patients in this trial and every other one. When I'm asked that question, why are we able to go faster? It's an interesting question. My response to that is frequently that the kind of collaboration we're seeing, the kind of sharing we're seeing, the kind of urgency that is felt by everybody in the community, the kind of teamwork that we're seeing with our colleagues at the Food and Drug Administration and with the pharmaceutical industry, it is why this is happening faster. These things tend to happen one step at a time, but with everybody working on a very large team, we're making headway orders of magnitude faster than we normally would. And so the secret to the speed is teamwork. Now, as far as safety is concerned, uh, all of these patients are hospitalized, so of course they're going to be followed by their treating physician in the hospital. They will also have an additional team, the clinical trial team, checking on them every single day. Then there's something called the Data and Safety Monitoring Board, the DSMB, that every single week gets together and looks at all the patients across all of the different sites, because there'll be up to 90 sites that are recruiting these 2,100 patients that we need to recruit, and saying, is there any signal of safety problems anywhere here? And then we might pause the trial, as has happened with ACTIV-3. And then every 2 weeks, there is a formal meeting of the DSMB to look at safety, look at efficacy, et cetera. And Francis, you and I were talking earlier today about the pauses in some of the trials, some of the vaccine trials in ACTIV-3, and whether people should be disturbed about that. I think, and you think, I know, that people should be reassured by that, because what it shows is that people are being neurotic about safety and
that's a really
bending over backwards to make sure.
And somebody's written in about that in terms of what about the paused vaccine? Since that's been asked, we're talking about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that got paused earlier this week. Yep. And again, it's a wonderful indication of just how careful everybody is being. A single patient who received the vaccine, or maybe the placebo, we don't know which, developed a surprising medical event that probably has no relationship to the vaccine, because medical events are happening all the time, and this was not one that would normally be associated with vaccination. But that was enough to say, okay, let's pause the trial, let's investigate that with great care, be sure that there's no connection between the vaccine and the event, and only then will they resume enrolling participants. Normally, you wouldn't really hear about that. That's the other thing, is pauses in clinical trials are extremely common, especially large ones where you have tens of thousands of people. Stuff's going to happen, and you always take it seriously. And generally, the public doesn't even know about it, but there's so much scrutiny right now that in this case, there's a lot of information about what's happening with these trials. Hey, we're having a Facebook, Twitter Live talking about a trial on immunomodulators for people who are sick in ICUs with this particular viral infection.
People are actually interested.
They are interested. But this is, after all, the worst global pandemic in more than 100 years. So no wonder they're interested. And no wonder they want to hold us accountable to be sure that we're doing things right and not rushing things through. And I want to reiterate what Chris said. Every kind of care is being taken here, both with safety, to be sure it's safe, and also, if we're going to say this works, we need to have the evidence that it does and not just say something hopeful. So, Chris, any final 15 seconds you want to say before we wrap this up?
Well, I just want to thank all the people who participated in creating this trial. There were probably 300 people across the country who made this possible, and all the people at Warp Speed and Active and all of that. This really was a very gratifying, it is a very gratifying team effort, and everybody needs to know that this really is all hands on deck exercise that all of us are engaged in, and that if you or your loved ones have the misfortune of becoming sick and ending up in the hospital, realize that you should ask about these trials, not only ACTIV-1, but the others that they might be eligible for, because people may not know to ask. So please do.
That's a really good point. And if your care provider doesn't know where they are, there's clinicaltrials.gov where these are all listed. Right. People can go and check it out. So yeah, we need to do this in partnership with people all across the country, across the world, find these answers, figure out how we're going to get past this terrible pandemic. It's going to take therapeutics. It's going to take vaccines. They're not competing with each other. We need both. And we're working as hard as we can at NIH to make that happen. So I'm Francis Collins, the director of NIH. I want to thank all of you who logged in for this conversation and sent in some great questions. Sorry I didn't get to quite all of them. And please keep your eyes on what's happening with all of this science. If we're going to get through COVID-19, it'll be because the best science and the best medicine has been brought to the table, and the public has decided to take part in these trials, and we've gotten answers, and ultimately we can put this darn virus in the rearview mirror. Aren't we all looking forward to that? It's going to be a little while. Meanwhile, wear your mask when you go outside. Keep that 6-foot distance. Don't congregate indoors, especially with no masks on. Wash your hands. Do all those things. We're going to get through it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.